A man was walking in the woods one day when he saw a bear out of the corner of his eye. He stopped, said a silent prayer. God, I know you can do all things. Will you please make this bear a fellow Christian? The bear caught up to the man, placed his paw on the man's shoulder, and said, Brother, will you pray with me? Dear God, for this meal that I am about to receive, make me truly thankful. This is The Christian Bear with Dr. Ben Hilskamp. Welcome to episode 18 of The Christian Bear. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Hilskamp. On this episode of The Christian Bear, we're going to pause our series on belief again for a special recording of a sermon that I preached on Sunday, September the 11th at Central City Church in Columbus, Ohio. Central City is currently doing a 4-part sermon series based loosely around the book Holy Love, A Biblical Theology for Human Sexuality by Dr. Steve Harper. I will put a link to Central City's website in the episode description, where you can view and listen to the first sermon in the series and subsequently the third and fourth, as well as, if you want to compare notes, how I actually delivered this sermon. So friends, I am going to be reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, and verses 26 through 27. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness God called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Then God said, Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humankind in God's image. In the image of God, God created them. Male and female, God created them. I was born into a Roman Catholic family. My father was a cradle Catholic, raised in an almost entirely German Catholic community in Northwest Ohio, where Catholic nuns taught in the public elementary school. My mom was raised nominally Baptist with Methodist influences. I was baptized at St. Timothy Parish in Dublin, Ohio, and grew up 4 small-town blocks from St. Benedict Parish in Cambridge, Ohio. My sister and I attended St. Benedict School and then Bishop Rosecrans High School. Following my first communion, I became an altar server. I joined the adult choir in 4th grade because there was no children's choir. Church was a second home for me. By the time I was in high school, I served at the 7 a.m. Mass, sang with the choir at the 9 a.m. Mass, taught Sunday school, and then either sang or sat with my parents at the 12 p.m. Mass. At school, I was the president of campus ministry, a sacristan, retreat leader, and more. You know those religious and self-righteous kids in high school? Yeah, that was me. And yes, I saw myself becoming a priest and leading a life focused on service to and in the church. One of my best friends and I planned to go to seminary at the Pontifical College Josephinum in Worthington, Ohio, and, God willing, be ordained Catholic priests by the time we were 27 or 28. During my first year of high school, I read a book entitled Goodbye, Good Men. The book argued that after decades of lax standards and liberal theology in the Catholic Church, that it was time to call back the good men to the Catholic priesthood. A good Catholic man, and therefore a good Catholic priest, this book said, was clean-cut, conservative, heterosexual, cisgender, athletic, and conducted himself in humble submission to church authority. To paraphrase the philosopher Pink, you're going to be a good Catholic man. You just have to change everything you are. These marks of a good Catholic man became a sort of box for me. The box was rigid, with sharp edges, black and white, and unchanging. And though I never conformed perfectly, Catholics are generally willing to excuse some flaws when a young man says he wants to be a priest. There was just one problem. I'm gay. I've known since I was 5 or 6 that I'm different. But in my sheltered environment, it would take me a while to learn what it meant to be queer. While I was in high school, the Catholic Church ordered that men with, quote, deep-seated homosexual tendencies, end quote, should neither be admitted to seminary nor ordained. Like many important and wide-ranging policies issued by churches and governments, the key terms were only vaguely defined. What were, quote, deep-seated homosexual tendencies? And how did one know if one or someone else had them? Did one need to act on these tendencies first? Was looking at porn or fantasizing about people of the same gender enough? Could youthful exploration of sexuality be excused? I remember reading at the time that homosexual men could be identified through psychological assessments because they were all narcissists. I didn't think I was a narcissist, but perhaps you are a narcissist if you don't think you are a narcissist. I doubled down on my Catholicism. I became the model Catholic boy. I read theological books and idolized radically conservative Catholic thinkers. This journey put me in constant contact with other young Catholics, many of them men. And they were gorgeous. Gorgeous, handsome men who were more and more, I realized, my type. While the topic of sexuality rarely came up, when it did, the public life I worked so hard to maintain came smashing into the reality of my deepest held secrets. While my friend went off to seminary and in time was ordained a Catholic priest, I suddenly found seminary to be too restrictive. I couldn't even see myself in many Catholic colleges. I ended up at a small Episcopal college far away from home. I joined the Catholic community there, but I also joined the university choir, which sang each Sunday in the college's chapel. Slowly, my attendance at Catholic Mass became non-existent, and I began to take communion in the chapel, a very big breach of Catholic practice. During my sophomore year, I came out as a gay man, and then left the Catholic Church to join the Episcopal Church. While I faithfully attended the college chapel and sang with the choir all but one Sunday during college, my attachment to organized religion became fluid. Since 2010, when I graduated from college, I've lived in 6 states. In fact, in 2016, I had lived in all 6 of those states in just 6 years. I attended 5 Episcopal churches, 2 Unitarian Universalist congregations, a Quaker meeting, a historic United Methodist congregation, and one of the original Dutch Reformed churches turned United Church of Christ in New York City. I even briefly flirted with the idea of becoming Roman Catholic again. During that time, I considered myself Christian, Wiccan, Unitarian Universalist, and a humanist. What I may have lacked in affiliation with one church, denomination, or even organized religion, I made up for in clarifying my credo, my personal set of beliefs. I began to recognize that humans like boxes. People who hold privileged identities really like boxes. Christians who conform to the evangelical or Roman Catholic and Stepford model of politeness crave their boxes. Regardless of our identities or backgrounds, I imagine we've all experienced time living in the model of perfection that I'm going to call the heteronormative Christian box. perfect Christians, we're told, are straight, cisgender, married procreatively, sure about their faith, so sure that it is no longer faith, but certainty, submissive to the church, and attending church and tithing religiously, pun intended. The heteronormative Christian box is reductive and constricting. Its entire purpose is to make you smaller than you are, so that someone else's idea of God can control you. Let me ask you a few questions. What happens when you question this box? What happens when you transgress this box? Here's some better questions. What happened when you questioned this box? What happened when you transgressed this box? The longer we lived among these restrictions, the more convinced we became that this was how God wanted us to live. The truth seemed so radical, so unexpected that we saw it as a lie. The truth is that rather than reinforce the toxic dynamics and restrictions, God demonstrates something entirely different in God's person and in creation. First, God is queer. God is queer. To be queer is to be non-normative, to be different. Someone or something that's queer is not different just for the sake of being different, but is fundamentally different than that which is normative. A queer person exists outside of the norm and lives their life beyond the expectations of normalcy. From the beginning of human time, God has existed outside of time. God is always beyond us. And creation mirrors its creator. Creation, too, is queer in its massive diversity. A diversity so vast that scientists continue to discover new species of animals and new ways for people to both sustain and to destroy their environment. Second, creation is non-binary. In Holy Love, Steve Harper addresses the non-binary nature of creation. He uses the example of day and night. In Genesis 1:1-5, God divides light from darkness, calling one night and one day. However, we don't experience just day and night. We experience dawn and dusk, midday and midnight, late morning and late afternoon, early morning and evening. Everything God creates is a spectrum, including gender and sexuality. God doesn't just create male and female. God creates male, female, transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, and many other genders. God sees these genders, and God calls them good. Third, creation is a moral narrative. In the beginning, God creates this fantastically diverse world and calls it good. The fact that the Creator names creation as good, as possessing intrinsic and unqualified worth, is important. Too often we have heard that being LGBTQIA+ is a fallen identity, that our romantic and sexual attractions are an element of the fall, and are therefore disordered. LGBTQIA+ people and our feelings and attractions were created before the fall. God saw that LGBTQIA+ people were good and declared that we have worth. Being queer is not a consequence of humanity's fall. God created us in God's image, God named us as good, and God did this before the fall. With those points in mind, we return to the heteronormative Christian box. We know that the box is uncompromising, restrictive, and constraining. We know that when people exist in this box, they are living inauthentic and destructive lives. But here's the truth about the box. It isn't biblical, and it definitely isn't Christian. God looked at God's creation, all of God's creation, and declared it good. God declared all of creation good before the fall. LGBTQIA plus people were created by God, and our identities were declared good by God before evil entered the world. Whether we identify as queer, cisgender, or heterosexual, we are part of a queer creation created by a queer God, who not only stands outside our small human conceptions of time and space, but who is so much greater than anything we could ever imagine. Because that creation is queer and so expansive, there is no one right way to exist or to act in creation. Ultimately, the most pathologically destructive part of living in the heteronormative Christian box is that we are blocked from seeing God. We were blocked from seeing God at the very moments that God was looking at us and saying, "You are good. You are loved just as you are. You, my child, mirror me, your creator, and I call you good." So friends, if you are queer, straight, or cisgender, if you are wrong in all the right ways, if you are treated like a fool because you color outside the lines, if you make messes and struggle in relationships, if people don't understand your special type of being, if you are weird and wonderful, whoever you are, whatever you are, and however you are good and you are loved by God, who exists totally outside all the lines and outside all the boxes. So friends, will you pray with me? God, you created each of us and all of creation in your image. You looked at us and declared us good. Yet the world and human institutions called us fallen and sinful. They taught us that you wanted us to change everything about ourselves and deny who you created us to be in order that we might please you. We were taught to live in shame because we would always fail your perfection. Help us, dear Creator, to cast off that darkness and see truly that we need not change or live in fear to be good in your sight. Continue to give us the grace to deconstruct what is not of you and construct faith perspectives which mirror the love you have always had and always will have for us. Radiate your acceptance and love of us even when we struggle to accept and love ourselves. Amen. This has been The Christian Bear with Dr. Ben Hillscamp.